Welcome to Introduction to Game Development. This is Computer Science 303 at Missouri State University. My name is Matthew, and I'll be showing you how to use UDK again. I will preface this tutorial with the disclaimer, of course, that I am not an expert. And to begin with, let's go ahead and bring our latest version of our lab map into our contents folder. So here we have for Lab 7. We'll copy it, bring it over to our shortcut to our maps folder, CSE 303, and I'll replace the current version so that we make sure that we have the most recent version in our contents folder to open. And now that that's done, I'll go and close these up, and I'll start loading the editor here. Now, we've been building an environment in our level, and the environment is defined not just by what we see, but also by what we hear. Sometimes sound can help set the mood, or it can be something more obvious like the flickering sound from a flame or the whirring noise of machinery. And so today we're going to be talking about sound. And real quick, I'll go ahead and load up our previous level here. And we're in the right folder. Here's Lab 7. And just to give a quick review of where we are in the current build here, if we come in and play our level, we can walk up. Pressing this button, we can see the door opening. And in a moment there, it'll actually close again as it reverses back to play the matinee sequence in reverse. We still have our Hello World button. And of course, we still have our third-person perspective button. There we go. And just to remind you how we've accomplished all of this, let's go ahead and take a look at our kismet so far. Now, in our kismet, we have this first trigger up here. Let me go ahead and make some more room in our kismet window. Let's go ahead and maximize. So, our first trigger just simply does the play announcement, which could also have a sound attached to it as well. But for now, it's just only doing the comment being put on the screen. We also have our third-person camera button. So when this trigger is used, it sends it to the camera, or it sets the camera's target and attaches it to the actor using these variables here. And then our final button here, our trigger, will begin the matinee sequence, which opens the door. Now, to begin with, when we talk about sound, there's really two things that we have to talk about. There's sound wave data, and then there's sound cues. We'll be talking about sound wave data, sound cues, various actors we can use to position sound throughout the level, ways we can add certain effects to our sounds, and eventually also to be able to create ambient zones of sound. Now, as I said, there's two types that we really have to be aware of. There's sound wave data and sound cues. Sound wave data is really just like a wave file. It's just the sound itself. And let's go ahead and bring up our content browser. I'll go ahead and close our kismet. And as we open our content browser, I have it over on the other screen here, bringing it up. Now, normally we've been working always with this favorites selected in our object type column here. This time, let's go ahead and go to all types. And if you can see, there's many more options now for our filtering. And if you go to, well, where is it? Sound wave data. And you can see a number of options showing up here. Sound node wave. And they all have different names for the different sounds you might hear, like a blaster rifle, or the whirring of machinery, or even various sounds of voices for like each number from 1 to 10, so that you could actually sequence different sounds together, do a countdown if you wanted to. But also, if you go ahead and double-click any of these, you can hear them, right? And one of the interesting things here about the difference between sound node waves and sound cues, which we're about to talk about, is that sound node waves will always sound exactly the same every time you use them. notice every single time that Fire Impact Explodes 02 is activated, it makes the exact same sound, because really it's just the sound wave data itself. Now, alternatively, let's go ahead and deselect our sound wave data filter, and let's go to sound cues for our filter. Now, sound cues are similar in that you're also going to hear a sound if you double-click them. But notice the second time I pressed it there, it was slightly different. It was a different noise. It was a lower pitch. And you can notice this with many of the sound cues. Not all of them. It depends on how the sound cue is set up. But many of these are able to be able to use several different sound wave nodes or sound node waves to have a selection of sounds that might be used. So the sound cue is not only the sound wave data itself, but also some set of instructions for how that sound wave data is used. And let's see if I can find one of them that I'm looking for here. Let me filter this for, or search for the word impact. And let's see. This is the one I'm looking for, the robot impact underscore gib medium underscore q. And notice when I click on it, it exhibits different sounds each time you play it. And if you right click under the second menu here, second menu option here, it's edit using sound cue editor. Now here in the sound cue editor we get an interface that's kind of similar to the Kismet interface that we've been working with to do gameplay features. And what we can see is basically from left to right there's a signal of a sequence of instructions that are being operated on before any of these sounds on the far right are actually activated. And if we double click these, or if we, while this is selected, if we play the play select node button up here, you can hear which sounds are being used. These are each different sound node wave, sound node data, wave datas, and you can hear them individually. And notice they're each attached to this random block. And this random block will essentially just generate a random number to decide which node, which sound wave is going to be played for any time it's activated. And you'll notice also down here in our properties for that random block, there's randomize without replacement. And if you mouse over each of these, it gives a pretty thorough explanation. But in general, what this means is that it's going to, even though the order of the sounds that it selects is random, it will go through all of them before repeating any others. Also, we have this modulator here. So this is going to, beyond just choosing one of these three sounds randomly, it's also going to modulate the pitch at which the sound is played. So it could have a minimum pitch or a maximum pitch, and could have a variable volume as well. And then the attenuator. And you'll notice in the attenuator here, we have a number of different options, but the big ones you need to really see here are radius min and radius max. And any sound cues that have this radius min or radius max, or that have this attenuation node, where you can adjust this radius min and radius max, those will be ambient sounds that, essentially, if you are outside of that radius max, you're not going to hear it at all. If you're inside that radius max but outside the radius min, then you'll be at some fall-off point where the volume of the sound is not as loud as it should be, or would be normally. And if you're inside that radius min, then the volume is at 100%. So, one moment. Now that we have an idea of how the sound cue editor works, we will come back to this. I'll go ahead and close this for now. But another important point to go over as well is whenever you go to any of these sound cues, if you right-click, you'll see Sound Classes Master. It's the third one down. It's right below the Edit Using Sound Cue Editor that we just selected. And the Sound Classes Master, this allows you to assign certain classes to the sounds that you might use. And this helps the engine prioritize which sounds are going to be used at any time and which ones might take precedence over others. So Master will basically treat it as if it's the top priority. Then you have different sound effects, and these are all broken down by character or weapons and so on and so forth. We have different kinds of music that might be played, and we also have the different voice options as well for all the different voice announcements or dialogues that might occur in the game. And So now we should really talk about how to actually use the sound in the level. So let's start off by making some kind of static mesh in our level that could maybe be a source for our sound that we might be using in here. So if I'll go ahead and deselect sound cues and select static meshes. And now let's go ahead and let's go back to storage tanks. They've been good to us so far. So here is some complicated static mesh of 2 storage tanks and a control panel. I will go ahead and turn this around so we can get a better look at it. And pressing spacebar, I can change my widgets. Going to the translation widget, we'll push it up into the wall. Now, the sound we're going to actually put into the level, it's not going to be associated with the static mesh at all, other than the fact that we're just going to place it near it. It's just giving us some kind of visual cue for where that sound will be generated from. And so now that we have it positioned there, now we'll actually have to put the sound into the level. So right beside our static mesh that we've just placed, let's go ahead and right click, go to Add Actor, and then under All Templates you'll see a bunch of different options here. And there's several here that involve ambient sound. We have ambient sound simple, ambient sound movable, ambient sound non-loop, ambient sound non-looping toggleable, ambient sound simple toggleable. And so of these options, though, only 2 of them actually work with sound cues. The other ones will take sound wave data, and they're not going to be able to process all the instructions that you might put into a sound cue. But the add ambient sound or add ambient sound movable will both use sound cues. And so let's go ahead and do an add ambient sound. And right away we see this, and we'll go ahead and say since we did not have a sound cue selected in the content browser, it's wanting us to go ahead and put one in there. So we'll go ahead and open our content browser. And deselecting static meshes, we'll go to sound cues, and we'll delete what we have in our search window here, and instead let's go for, I know the elevator has a nice continuous looping machinery sound, and so we can hear it right here. And since that was a looping cue, it was going to keep on playing until I selected something else. But if we go ahead and right click on this elevator 01 underscore loop cue, and we go to edit using the sound cue editor, we have the attenuation node, we have the looping node, and we have this the actual sound itself. So if we go to the attenuation, and remember we have that min or max radius that we might be able to adjust. We don't want to necessarily be able to hear this. 2000 for our radius max is well outside the area of our level so far. So essentially this would be audible anywhere you might be in our level as it currently exists. So let's bring that down quite a bit. Let's make this 400, and let's make the radius min, let's make that 100. And doing that, we'll go ahead and close that. And now while we have the sound cue selected, we'll go ahead and hit the green arrow in this ambient sound cue. And so now that elevator 01 underscore loop cue is the ambient sound that will be used at wherever that little speaker is that we see here. Whenever we added that ambient sound template, it created this little speaker here. You can see the radius of that sound by looking at this the outer sphere here indicates the outer radius min, or the radius max, and this inner sphere. Oh, and I accidentally moved outside the level here. And that inner radius here was defined by that inner sphere was defined by our radius min. So now if we go ahead and let's go ahead and hit play. Oh, and our lighting needs to be rebuilt. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. One moment. Now you may notice after you've built your lighting that you have this warning here that object has overlapping UVs. If you haven't seen that before, don't worry about it. It just means that the texture provided for your static mesh doesn't match perfectly with the shape of the object that you were given, it's more of an artist's responsibility to make sure that those don't occur. It won't cause problems for the most part unless you're expanding your static meshes to really large size, in which case you might see some artifacted light around it. But let's go ahead and close that. Now that we've built our lighting and we want to inspect how our ambient sound is working. Now notice out here, we can't hear it at all because we're outside that outer sphere that we saw earlier. We can approach our door, and pressing E to open it, we walk towards it, and we get closer. Oh! Now you can hear that mesh, or that ambient sound right there. Now remember, we actually wanted to have this sound centered inside of our static mesh there. So I'll go ahead and tuck it right inside now that we have its radius set and everything. So we're not going to really need it too much now. If you need to access that again while you have something hidden inside another object, and we can actually just move it right outside so you can still click on it, but you could always press W, or one moment, Alt W, I'm sorry. Pressing Alt W will make your static meshes appear or disappear. So you can always get back at anything that you might have tucked inside part of the structure of your level. And so now we've learned how to use ambient sound, how to edit the sound cue to affect its radius, to position it in the level. Let's learn also how we can perhaps use sounds at triggered times, perhaps using matinee. So for instance, we have a matinee sequence that operates this moving door out here. If we open our kismet, you can also access matinee through here, but opening our kismet, bring up our window here. If we go down to our trigger that goes down to the matinee here, and double clicking on matinee, if you remember, we had this little window here. It's our matinee editor. And while we're in the matinee editor, notice there's that Unreal Matinee written up in the top left. And on the bottom, whenever you select that black bar, it will actually show you what's happening within that matinee sequence. So right now I have my matinee sequence going beyond the actual movement so that it has a pause before it might do the reverse. And we only really need to add one more thing here in order to actually start adding sound. Now you have several options for adding sound, but one way that we might do it is to use an events track. And we could have, in kismet, we could have a number of nodes that play a sound, and then we can activate those nodes through an event track in matinee. So if we go ahead and right click on our door group that we created last time, and you'll see add new event track. It's the second option. And we'll go ahead and put that in right now. Now, for each key event that we add into the event track, it's going to put another output node in our matinee kismet node that we could see earlier in our kismet interface where we double-click to enter this. So let's go ahead and we'll put a key moment here at the very beginning, and we'll call this door opening. And then also, I'll drag my black bar over, and where the door stops moving, we'll add another key moment, or key event. Event key, rather. And so now this new event key, we'll call it door closing. Or we'll call it a door stop opening. And so now we'll hit OK. And now that we have this event track and these two keys put in there, right, we'll go ahead and close our matinee editor. And if we go back to kismet, notice we have two new outputs on our matinee node here. We have door opening and door stop opening. And so now if we go ahead and go back to our content browser, we can select some sounds to use that we might trigger with those outputs. And so let's go ahead and just search for door. So we have this one, Oh no, UDK has stopped working. Just one moment. Okay, sorry for that. Back to where we were. And so now if we go and search for door under our sound cues, go back to all types and back to sound cues. And you see we have close start cue, close stop cue, open start cue, open stop cue. And now let's go ahead and if you double click any of these, you can hear them. So rather similar, but let's go ahead and we'll do the open start cue. And while that's selected, back in our content browser, move over here, we'll say right click, new action, sound, and play sound. And oh, and it did not pull it in. So okay, even though we had this selected, we're still going to have to go ahead and actually add the play sound. So while it's selected, under the first property submenu here, the sequence action play sound, the very first option there is the play sound, and we'll go ahead and hit our green arrow to pull in our sound cue. And let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and do another one for when it closes, or when it stops opening. So we'll do another new action while the other sound cue is selected. Go to sound, and then play sound. And then, of course, we'll have to add that sound cue in here as well with the green arrow. So now we have two different sounds that we can activate here. And so we'll connect from the door opening event from our event track to play on this sound. And also the door stop opening, we'll get it to play the other one whenever it reaches that event in the track. So now we'll close this. And let's go ahead and save. And now, just to test our features, I'll go ahead and rebuild our lighting. And now that everything's built, I'll go ahead and close my windows here, and here we are. We approach the button, and we should hear the sound the moment we press this as the door starts opening. Oh, there we go. And you'll notice whenever it goes in reverse, it does the same sound again. And so that's one way that we can also add sounds besides just the ambient sound that we put over here. We now also have sounds that are triggered at specific times as we choose using the event track in Matinee. And so now I think the main thing for us to learn would be to how to import our own new sounds. Now, we can only import 16-bit WAV files. And now I've went ahead and prepared one beforehand, this clown horn sound. And when I downloaded it, though, it wasn't a 16-bit WAV file. So one of the options you have for how you might prepare your files, this is one service I found online that I use quite often. It's the onlineconvert.com. And, I'll take you to the actual site here. And going to onlineconvert.com, it's with a dash between online and convert. You can convert audio files, video files, and so on. But I use this quite often for audio file conversion. And you have the option of choosing any file that you like for sound and converting it into a WAV file, and you can choose the bit encryption during the conversion process, so you can always make it a 16-bit WAV file so that it can properly be used in UDK. Now, even though UDK only accepts imports of 16-bit WAV files, it does its own audio compression. So it's not going to be that same full file size as part of your final project afterwards. So getting rid of that, though, you can see on my desktop here, I went ahead and put this clownhorn_converted that I got from onlineconvert.com. And we're going to import that into UDK. So to start off with, let's go ahead and go to our content browser. And now let's go ahead and under import, and we'll go to our desktop, and on our desktop we have clownhorn_converted. So now we'll go ahead and bring that in, and grouping, we'll call this just sound, and we can just call it clown horn converted, that's fine. We'll say OK, and so here's our new sound node wave. And if we double click it, we can hear that clown horn. And we can use this in some ways, but we still have to actually produce the sound cue in order to be able to use it, the more advanced features, and actually control aspects of how the, or give instructions for how the sound might be used. So if we go ahead and right click, and we'll say new sound cue, and we'll call this clown horn cue, and say OK. And right away we see this sound cue editor again, except now we don't have anything in here, so we'll have to add our own features. And let's just assume that we want to use this sound as is, and so we can go ahead and right click, and let's make sure we have our sound node wave selected in the content browser, the one we just imported. And now in our new sound cue, while that's selected, we right click, and we can say sound node wave colon clown horn underscore converted. We'll go ahead and click that, and then from the speaker we'll connect it from the output there into the input on there. So now this sound cue does nothing more than play that sound node wave. We could put more advanced instructions in there if we wanted to, but really this just allows us to use it like a normal sound cue. So we'll close that, and while this is selected here, we'll go back into Kismet. And so far all we've been using are triggers that we use by approaching in the game by pressing and activate by pressing E. Another event that we might be able to use that you might find useful would be a new event and level loaded. This will be whatever Kismet sequence we want to occur or to begin at the very beginning of the level. And so while this is zoomed in here, you can see there's loaded and visible, beginning of level, level reset, and so on. And so let's go ahead and just to show that our new sound cue works, we'll go ahead and say new action, sound, play sound. And then under play sound, we'll make sure we pull in our new sound cue. And then from the loaded and visible output, we'll connect this to the play sound input for play. And now we'll close this, we'll save everything. And now, play this level. You can hear the clown sound as soon as you come into the level. So now we know how to import our own sounds. You can do the same thing with music, any other sound effects you want. We know how to put sounds at triggered moments within an event track in Matinee. We know how to use ambient sounds within the level and actually set the radius if we like as well. So that about covers it for sound. If we have time in the future, we'll go ahead and cover how to do more advanced things with sound in Matinee. But I'll see you next time for our work with emissive lighting.